Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I am Nifemi Oguntoye, standing in for the veteran Yuri Folari, fondly called Uncle Yuri on the show. And we're turning our attention this morning to issues that indeed will shape the Nigerian economy in the new year. We're looking ahead on the heels of the worst downturn in history. Recall the pandemic in 2020. And two things were on our lips last year, the pandemic and its resultant impact on the global price of oil, what experts now refer to as the oil price shock. And we're hearing the international oil benchmark, the Brent crude, against which Nigeria's oil is priced, rose by 3.6% just yesterday to $53.90 per barrel. That's the highest since March 2020. It fell to $51 late yesterday. That's about 8:30 p.m. Nigerian time. So it's no longer news that the Nigerian economy slipped into recession after our GDP contracted in two consecutive quarters last year. And we're told that this is bringing us to the second recession in just 4 years. They say there are just about a few reasons why we go into recession. It has been mostly caused by a fall in the price of oil. The problem with the Nigerian economy last year, however, is not just the COVID-19 pandemic. I like the way economic experts put it, and they are saying, ProShare NG puts it like this. It says it's more of a structurally weak economy affected by externally induced shocks. Experts are now currently divided as to how much the economy will grow in the new year. Some are postulating as low as 1.2%. I'm joined by two of them this morning on the program. In the studio with me is Oladotun Mabinuri, chartered accountant and economist, and he will also be joined via Skype by the Director General, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Dr. Muda Yusuf. Good morning, gentlemen, and thank you for finding time to come.
Thank you for having us.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's begin with Dr. Yusuf. I'm just seeing your comment on one of the newspapers reacting to the position of the federal government that Nigeria will soon exit recession, and you are saying categorically that the country's exit from recession is not feasible during the first quarter of the year. Why is your position rather pessimistic?
Well, thank you very much, and good morning once again to our viewers and to Dotun and yourself. It's not a question of being pessimistic. It's a question of relating to the realities and the facts that are on ground. I must admit that we have been seeing some progressive improvements in the economy, especially from the point of view of the performance of our GDP, from a Q2 contraction of 6.1%. There was an improvement in Q3, that's quarter 3, to 3.62%, which is an improvement. We also expect a further improvement in quarter 4. But you know, we had between quarter 3 and quarter 4, we had this end-SARS problem. We are now having a resurgence of the COVID. So all of these things pose very serious downside risk to economic recovery. So we feel that because of all of these challenges, as you know, even as we are speaking now, lockdowns are being contemplated. Some sectors are also being restricted as we speak. Economic activities may begin to slow down again. And not just in Nigeria, but also in other parts of the world. Only recently, I think yesterday, UK was contemplating a complete shutdown for about 3 weeks or so. So we are almost getting back to the severity of the pandemic that we had in the second or first quarter of last year. So these were some of the things that make us feel that if we are getting out of recession, I will be looking at best, you're looking at the second quarter of this year, but certainly not this first quarter, because with all the restrictions, all the COVID protocols, this is a way of slowing down the economic performance and economic activities. So these are some of the reasons why we felt that, well, we are improving, You are gradually getting out of it, but you may not completely exit it in the first quarter of this year.
Let me stay with you, Dr. Yusuf, just for a few minutes. Is there a sense of hope in the position of the Minister of Information? He made reference to some gains achieved last year, irrespective of all of the downturns that you highlighted. The fact that in rounding off 2020, the Nigerian Stock Exchange was named the best performing stock market among the 93 equity indexes being tracked by Bloomberg across the world. And all the figures, according to him, are there. The all-share index opened at 38,800.01 and moved by 310.16 points. He also touched on the fact that OPEC might be slowing down on its cuts in oil production, which also might boost revenue coming from oil in the new year. How do you react to this?
Well, these are positive developments which one cannot deny. But in matters like this, I think it's better to be very realistic and to relate to the fundamental issues. The performance of the stock exchange was not so much of any rigorous or major change in the fundamentals of either the businesses or the economy itself. It was essentially a consequence of what happened with our monetary policy, what happened with our money market, returns on investment in the money market. As you know, as a result of the policies of the central bank, the interest rate yields on treasury bills, government bonds, on fixed income investment, and all of these things have crashed completely. And because of the environment that we have, because of all the risk in the investment environment, there has been a lot of migration of investment from the money market to the stock market. These were essentially the factors that drove the performance of the stock market. So these are not very fundamental changes in the economy. These are not things that we say could be sustainable. If tomorrow now the central bank adjusts its policy with respect to interest rates and some of its liquidity policies that have boosted liquidity in the market, you could see a reverse flow of resources away from the stock market. So I believe it is a good development, but it's not something that is that deeply fundamental. What we can be looking at are more fundamental things that can drive recovery, like looking at our structural issues, looking at the challenges businesses are facing at the ports, looking at our things like the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. These are fundamental things that could change narratives one way or the other.
I'll be back with you shortly, Dr. Yusuf. Just kindly hold your thoughts. Let me bring in Mr. Mabunori into this conversation right here in the studio. Just stand by while we keep working on that network to get better. So the expectation was that the economy was going to recover in 2021 as countries relaxed lockdown and the issue of social distancing. The discovery of vaccine for the virus, coupled with improved consumer demand, is expected to speed up recovery. But just like Dr. Yusuf mentioned, some countries are returning to COVID-19 restrictions, the UK, and even there are rumors of that in Nigeria. Even the federal government says it's not tolling that path. What does this mean for the news or the expectation of recovery in the new year?
All right. Thank you for having me here once again. And before I go into my discussion, give me an opportunity to say a very big thank you to Dr. Muda. He gave me this platform 5 years ago, and it's a privilege we are sharing the same stage together. Thank you very much, sir. For me, as far as COVID-19 is concerned, it's not the major shock that we have in Nigeria. We have been in crisis before now, so it's just more like crisis meeting us in crisis. So then coming out of it, I think about 5 weeks ago, I was there with, I shared the same stage, this stage with Anjuri, the SSA, to the president, and he said the Nigeria economy is coming out of a recession in the first quarter of 2021, and I said I beg to disagree. Fine, we'll come out in 2021, but not first quarter. Do you understand? Because just as doctor said, the NSAS protests and some other factors that happened in the last quarter of 2020, that's October to December, are yet to be factored into the GDP. So fine, we move from negative 6.1 to negative 3.6 is an improvement. But when when the disruption we have in the economy in December, October to December is factored in, we should also expect a negative growth. So how do you want to come out of this, the recession? And again, there is this distrust between the citizen and the government. The Nigerian citizens, as we speak, have little or no level of trust in the government. The PTF, the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, the other time, the chairman, which is Boss Mustafa, said, we will, the economy, all schools or religious gathering or general gathering should be prohibited till January 18. On the Twitter handle of Mr. President, he said he's extending that lockdown to end of October. Minister of Information came yesterday and said the federal government is not considering locking down the economy. So who should we believe? Which policy, whose words should we rely on? So all these inconsistencies in the economy, number one, will bring unnecessary volatility in the economy. People will not, investing in the economy will be, if you want to invest in the economy, you have to think twice. Because you look at, okay, what should I do? Should I go by what Mr. President is saying, that the economy should be locked till end of March, or I should go with what PTF has said, or I should go with Lai Mohammed? And again, the economy, I need to advise here. Because we look at the economic aspect, we should also look at non-economic aspect, which is maybe the political or the socio-political. The Minister of Information, so to speak, is overeating the so-called the polity. You should, to a very large extent, as someone in government, have a shock absorber for criticism. It was yesterday going against international ICC and then all these NGOs giving their report that Nigeria is a failing economy. And you are refuting it with no facts to back it up. So let's leave sentiments. Let's talk about fact and figure. Let's talk about data. Let's use the other time you went against CNN, this, that, and no fact, no figure, no counter no counter evidence against to what they are saying. So if you want to come out and say something, please come with fact and figure. Because whatever you are saying, international community are watching. And this is what determines the FDI, the foreign direct investment to the economy. If you look at our FDI, this set has actually reduced. A case where we have foreign remittances, that is Nigerians working abroad, sending money at home, being higher than foreign direct investment, it spells doom.
They say a more meaningful economic recovery is possible only when the exchange rate and inflation is stabilized. What, in your opinion, has been responsible for that instability in the outgone year? Now,
in terms of foreign exchange, our economy is very, very open to what they call exogenous variable, which is external shock, factor that we have no control over, which is our revenue, our oil revenue. Oil revenue, for instance, accounts for about 80% of our foreign earnings and about 60% of our revenue, of our general overall revenue in the economy. And that is an undue exposure to international, to variables that you don't have anything, to external shocks, exogenous variables. So if, for instance, there is another disruption, fine, we are happy now that the price of crude oil has gone above $50. What if we have another disruption anytime from now and it goes below, even to the point of negative as we have it during the pandemic? What do we do? That means we are really exposed again. So our exposure to oil revenue has accounted for a weak currency. Although in this 2021, we should expect a weaker dollar. That dollar to prevail because economies are recovering because of this issue of vaccines that have been discovered. So when dollar weakens, of course, our naira will improve. But that is also not, we should not isolate the fact that exchange rates can also be distorted, that is negatively, if there is another disruption in the oil market. So our exposure to oil market has affected our what they call exchange rate. Then again, in terms of inflation, there's what we call pass-through effect of inflation, pass-through effect of exchange rate. When most of the goods that we are producing, and if at all we are producing, some raw materials are still coming from outside the country. So if exchange rate weakens, or if our exchange rate is worsened, what happens? We are buying what we are buying at maybe 370, we are mentioning at 306 to $1 before now, is now 490 to $1. Then whatever you buy, you sell, cost push inflation. So as you are bringing in these goods, and if your good, for instance, is a necessity, or a good to an extent that you can pass the effect of that exchange rate to the consumer. So that's what we call pass-through effect. You pass the increase in the exchange rate or the weakened naira to your consumer. And by doing that, of course, the price of goods and services will go up. So those are one of the reasons that we have what we call, we have really battled with inflation in this economy. I mean this year 2020, and to improve that means our exchange rate should improve so that the pass-through effect will reduce, and other sources of inflation can also be curbed.
Let's get back very quickly to the DG Lagos State Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Dr. Yusuf, we experienced a very volatile and highly pressured foreign exchange in 2020. We saw the CBN devaluing naira to ameliorate that pressure. With the shortage of forex, which in some people's opinion is undermining the value of naira, do you foresee another devaluation of the naira in the new year?
Well, what happens in the foreign exchange market? Of course, the key issues are the way or the model of the management of the market. You know, the market is not exactly a market-driven exchange rate system. You know, before now there has been a lot of discussion and debate on the imperative of unifying the exchange rate so that you don't have multiple rates. Because the multiple rates that we have has been creating a whole lot of issues in the foreign exchange market. To strengthen the currency or to stabilize the currency, there are two things. You can manage the demand side, which is what the central bank has been doing. You can also create incentives on the supply side to encourage the inflow of foreign exchange. Because the inflow of foreign exchange is not only from oil. We have inflows that come from diaspora remittances. We have inflows that come from FDI, that's investment, from portfolio investors. We have inflows that come from export proceeds. You know, if we have the right kind of policy, if the exchange rate management framework is market-driven, you can see a remarkable improvement in these inflows. And because the exchange rate is a price, if the supply side improves, the exchange rate will improve, it will appreciate. But if the policy that we have is a policy that is suppressing supply and encouraging demand, then we continue to have this volatility. So I'm happy to see that the CBN is gradually, you know, taking steps to unify the market, to unify the rates. If that happens, then we can see a far more improvement. We can see a major reduction in the volatility of the exchange rates. And we can even see an appreciation of the exchange rates. Because the way you manage the foreign exchange market is a very critical factor in driving investors' confidence. Because the confidence of investors is a very critical factor in stabilizing the economy, in stabilizing the foreign exchange market, in even growing investment, in attracting capital into the economy. So this movement or this shift, gradual shift of the CBN to a market-based mechanism, I'm sure will bring a whole lot of improvement. Of course, just as we have reported, we are beginning to see some slight improvements in oil price. OPEC is taking steps to ensure that these prices are retained and possibly improved. If all of these things happen together, and if there is no major disruption in our supply, I'm talking of disruptions in the Niger Delta and all of that, then we can see a much better situation with the exchange rate. Of course, we have the vaccines. The vaccines are now hopefully will help to mitigate the risk that the COVID pandemic is posing for economies all over the world. If all of these things happen and improve in 2021, then globally and even nationally, we see a major improvement with regard to the foreign exchange market. And because the foreign exchange market is so strategic, is so critical to practically all sectors of the economy. If we get it right with the foreign exchange market, a lot of things will normalize. A lot of things will fall back into shape. And the economy will resume much better performance in terms of growth and in terms of inclusiveness in 2021, if we get all of these things right.
Let us quickly touch on the implication of some government policies on the economy. Thankfully, the land borders are open again. But in the outgone year, there was a lot of talks about deregulating the downstream sector, the PMS price deregulation, and there's also the issue of cost-reflective electricity tariff hike. We saw Labour moving in and putting a lot of pressure on the government to, again, tamper with the price of petrol as we currently see it. How do these impact on the economy vis-a-vis the recovery, the speed of recovery that we have talked about?
Yeah, these two things you mentioned are very important policy reforms that the government has put in place. Of course, some of these reforms may not be popular socially or politically. But if you want to build an economy that is sustainable, an economy that is stable in the long run, these reforms are necessary. They are inevitable. Now, concerning the deregulation of the downstream, of course, there has been some pushback from Labour and to some extent from the citizens. But the benefit of that to the economy is that first, it will reduce all the leakages and the corruption that characterize the subsidy regime. Secondly, it will also incentivize investment to the downstream oil sector. Because we have been in oil production or as an oil producing country for close to over 50 years now. And yet, as we speak, we don't have any functioning refineries. You know, all the 4 refineries that we have are neither here nor there. They have been comatose. If they have even worked at all, the capacity utilization has been very low. And all of these things are happening because the space is dominated, populated, essentially by the public sector institutions, by the public sector enterprises. And the public sector is not cut out to deliver outcomes in this kind of areas. It's a space that the private sector can do much better than the public sector. So if we are able to sustain the reform, which is the deregulation of the downstream, then we are likely to see a lot more investment. And such investment can even make Nigeria a hub in terms of the oil and gas products. I'm talking of things like petrochemicals, things like even the PMS, the diesel, the kerosene, fertilizer, and things like that. Because if there is any sector where normally we should have a strong comparative and competitive advantage, it is the oil and gas sector. Because we have a resource that we are blessed with. We have one of the biggest gas reserves in the whole world. We also have the crude oil reserves. But because of the policy environment over the years, we have not been able to optimize the opportunities that these things present. So happily, steps are being taken now to introduce reforms. We also have the petroleum industry bill, which will also help to improve the policy environment if we get the bills right, the policy environment in the oil and gas sector. So by the time we complement the regulation of the downstream sector with the putting in place of the petroleum industry bill, if it is passed very quickly, this could be a game changer for the economy in terms of economic diversification within the sector, in terms of foreign exchange earnings, in terms of revenue, in terms of investment, and in terms of job creation. Quality jobs for that matter. And now that we are stepping into the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, this could even make Nigeria a major hub for oil and gas-based industries on the continent. But the policy environment has to be right. And the steps that have been taken with regard to the regulation of the downstream, with regard to the petroleum industry bill, are very important steps, which needs to be supported. I know that because of the social impact of some of these policies, there may be some pushback and all of that, which I understand. That is why the government has been a bit cautious in pushing through the deregulation. You can see that the government has been pushing it gradually.
Absolutely. Dr. Yusuf. Just stand by. I'll be back with you. You talked about the social impact of these policies, and it's a very tricky one. Very lofty ideas, the possibilities and potential that deregulation will bring. But again, we must also talk about the purchasing power of the people. Is there a sense or, a way and method to which these policies can be buffered, can be cushioned? Because if it's unbearable for the people, they are likely going to resist it.
Yeah, the other time I found it very, very amazing when the president said, when fuel price was increased sometimes last year, and the president was giving a speech and he said, we can't buy oil cheaper than Saudi Arabia. I was comparing different countries, and to myself, I was just laughing. I said, what is the average income of a Saudi Arabian? So if you are comparing our expenditure, why not compare our income also? So minimum wage in Nigeria is 30,000 naira, which some people are still struggling to execute. Then you are looking at our that we cannot buy oil lower than, if you do the mathematics, equate our exchange rate, our minimum wage to our oil price, that of Saudi, then make one of them the soil formula. This is a simple mathematics, then you know the actual price we have to pay, or the actual minimum wage we should have in Nigeria. So if you can't do that, then it will be a bit absurd to just compare the two economies just like that. So purchasing power is one of the most important component of, most of the important factor we should look at. Because if you look at Nigerian GDP, the basic component of GDP, which are consumption, investments, government expenditure, then international trade, which is import and export. Consumption, which is the C part of our GDP, accounts for about 73% of our GDP. So that means whatever affects consumption affects 73% of Nigerian economy. That's why we during the lockdown, when purchasing power was impaired, when people could not buy goods and services, and we went into recession. That's to tell you how important consumption is to the economy. So what I believe at this juncture, what government should do before going into the regulation is providing environment to increase people's take-home, to increase people's ability to make money. For even Nigeria, not even looking at, because if you look at the number of civil servants, they are now up to 1 million compared to over 80 million labor force that we have in Nigeria. So if you look at the 80 million, 79 million that are that are working on their own to generate income, whether in the private sector or on entrepreneurship, why not create an enabling environment for them to increase their take-home? So if that is increased, then deregulating the oil sector means, okay, I've given you enough money to buy this. Because if you deregulate the economy and the oil sector to the point where maybe a liter of oil is being sold for 1,000 naira, how many people can afford that? We'll still go back to drawing board, to square one. And that's why government is a bit, as the doctor said, that's why government is a bit skeptical to look at the social impact of the full deregulation of the economy. But before you can look at that, as I said, try to improve the well-being of the people. When the well-being is improved, when their purchasing power they have enough purchasing power, then the deregulated economy means you have enough resources to do this. In all fairness, we have the cheapest pump price among the oil-producing nation. But we look at their revenue, their income, or their per capita income. Ours is nothing compared to theirs. So if that is the case, why not work on that per capita income first, or the ability to buy? Then we now look at the regulation. Because if you don't do the regulation without putting all this in place, we'll go back to, in fact, we'll be worse off. Where there are some policies that we are trying to, which we call the spiral effect. We are trying to make people are better off, and in the long run, you realize that they are worse off. So government needs to be very careful in this instance, and then bring up the economic team to look into the consumption component of GDP. Because without that, any policy might really not fly as far as the economy is concerned.
So all eyes on the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which was established in 2018 with the sole aim of creating a single market for goods and services in Africa. We understand that it's going to create the world's largest single market of close to 1.2 billion consumers and workers, and that has taken effect on the 1st of January. We'll be talking more about this when we return, and also other issues around the economy in Nigeria. Stay with us. We'll be back. Nigerian economy in 2021 is our focus on the show this morning. I have Oladoto Mabinuri, chartered accountant and economist, joining me in the studio. Via Skype is Dr. Muda Yusuf, Director General of the Lagos State Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Gentlemen, thank you for staying the course on the program this morning. Dr. Yusuf, let me come to you very quickly. There's a lot of talks about diversifying the economy. Mr. President also talked about that during his New Year's speech. Last year, we're told that the FIRS recorded close to 98% of its target, raking in over 4 trillion naira in revenue. What is the burden of this taxation on this economy? We understand that it is the way to go if enough revenue isn't coming from the oil sector. But I want us to look at the issues of multiplicity in taxation. There is the value-added tax. For instance, I paid a prepaid electricity tariff recently, and I noticed that out of a bill of 5,000 naira, close to 500 naira was deducted from that bill. For VAT, are this monies being remitted appropriately? And how do we reconcile this this alternative in a situation where people are struggling with their finances?
Well, the challenge of multiple taxation is a very big challenge in the business environment. And sometimes those in authority don't realize that when you relax the tax environment, you help to create more investment. If you create more investment, the economy will grow. If the economy grows, revenue will grow. So there is a nexus between the appropriateness of the tax environment, the quality of the tax environment, and the performance of the economy and the growth in revenue. So it is important to realize that connection. Because if you have a tax environment where those who are normally supposed to generate the tax are faced with very huge burden, that some of them either die, or they are performing optimally, or they relocate, or they just close their business and go and begin to buy treasury bills and all of that. The economy will be worse off. And even the revenue that we are trying to realize, the revenue may begin to decline. So the quality of the tax environment is very important. Now, when we talk about multiplicity of taxes, sometimes those in government don't quite understand what those of us in business are talking about. For us in business, any money, any resources that is being drawn from the private sector, from investors to government agencies, is also a form of taxation. Now we have the corporate tax. We have the education levy. Then for some companies, you pay the telecoms tax. Then you have the VAT. You have withholding tax. You have import duty that you pay. You have export duty. These are federal taxes. Then at the state level, you have, in some cases, taxes by the state. You pay payee, that is for the individual. Then you pay property tax in some states. And so on and so forth. In local governments, you also have all sorts of levies that they impose on micro and small enterprises. So if you take all of these things together, sometimes it imposes a very heavy burden. So it is very important that we harmonize these things, we streamline it. And again, one of the concerns that we have in the private sector is the fact that we are practically funding all the regulatory agencies, almost practically. Because if you are being regulated by any agency, there are fees and levies that you pay, sometimes annually. And when you engage some of these agencies, why are you imposing so much fees for your activity? Because ideally, the agencies are supposed to be funded from the taxes that are paid. They will tell you that, well, they are not being properly funded. They need to generate revenue internally. And this happens with practically all agencies. So if you are in a sector or you are in a business where you are being regulated or interfacing with 5 agencies, in addition to the normal taxes that you pay, you still have to be paying to all these agencies, almost on an annual basis. They may call it licensing fee, they may call it registration, they may call it renewal, they call it all sorts of names. This is not good for the economy. As I keep saying, for any economy to recover and recover fast, we need to encourage investment. If our policies are killing investments or discouraging investments, then it will slow down the pace of economic recovery. So we need to look at our tax environment properly. We need to regulate the amount of burden that regulatory agencies impose on businesses, either at the federal level, the state level, or the local government level. Sometimes it can even be worse, even the local government, where you have all manner of people in all manner of uniforms collecting money from all these poor traders, poor businesses, micro enterprises, sometimes without any control. So there has to be a way to control and regulate all these activities so that you don't impose too much burden.
Absolutely, Dr. Yusuf. Let me hold you again for a few minutes. Let's turn our attention very quickly to the phone lines. Mazi Okora first called in from Arochukwu in Abia State. Good morning, Mazi. You have 20 seconds.
The studio and the sky. You see, there's something I've just discovered, this issue of our moving in terms of 2021, that's the economy. Now, World Bank and IMF, April, May 2020, said that it will be very, very difficult for any country come 2021 to come out from anything, or to just talk about making profit in whatever they are doing. That is the second quarter from June 2021. Now, looking at Nigerian economy presently, as we are talking, the public-private partnership is not there. There is no way a country can move depending on the government. Individuals, at least there is need for government to empower individuals. Those who are already in the system, give them soft loans. At least when you give these soft loans, in terms of payment, the payback will be very, very in a very soft way. So that to end them also to bring in other people into the system. But the situation whereby the capitalist is there, for you to penetrate, it takes you time because you don't have the resources, you don't have the manpower. Now, where are we heading to? Because I sit down here for today because when you check very well, let us take it fairly and straightforward that the unemployment rate in Nigeria today, in terms of 75% with the youth, how do we, so I'm just asking our guests, both the one in Sky, the one in the studio, how do we solve this problem of Nigerian unemployment presently now? Because if we don't solve unemployment in Nigeria today, there is no way you can stop all these vices going on in the country. Thank you very much. Have a pleasant day. God bless all of us.
Well, thank you very much for your contribution. I'm just going to give you 1 minute to react to that.
Okay.
Now, perhaps he's talking about the rising unemployment in the country and what can be done to fix it.
You know, the biting effect of unemployment is that it creates social unrest because, as the saying goes, an idle hand is a devil's workshop. And a case where we have 27.2, the last reported unemployment rate is 27.1%, which translates to 21,700,000 Nigerians are unemployed. That is, people that are, when just 21 million, it doesn't mean generally, it means people in the labor force, people that are willing to work, that are ready to accept the prevailing wage rate, and yet they're unable to get employment. That's a very huge, it's like a whole economy like Ghana, not working, not doing anything. So that means if you look at an economy whose population is about 21 million, and you compare to us, that means their GDP is what we are losing.
So that's those 21 million people, what do they do?
Well, they look for daily survivor, okay, which is, you know, dependent on relatives. That is why the dependent ratio in Nigeria is a bit high. That's a case where the family of 10 is only 2 or one of them that is working. That means the remaining 8 or 9 people depend on those 1 or 2.
And that directly impacts on the quality of life. On
quality of life, on standard of living, and then on even the standard of living, so to speak, which is totally, so a case where we have someone being employed for a very long time, well, there's what we call loss of skills in economic. So before you know it, such person is totally out of place. Then when the employment comes, it's totally finding it difficult to fit in. Age is setting, fatigue is setting.
Please hold your thoughts just for a minute. George has called in from Ikeja. Good morning, George.
Good morning, Nifemi. Please, I would like to ask your guest, the analyst, the financial analyst, what is their relationship with government? It's not sufficient to just be condemning policies. I thought the Chamber of Commerce is part and parcel of the economic team that the president set up. Isn't there a way that these ideas they come on air to project is communicated in a way that it can become part and policy of government? I want to see solutions, not just crying wolf. I haven't heard recommendations from them. They're just saying, this is what is wrong, this is what is wrong. But what is the alternative? And these alternatives, how do you communicate it that those that can put it into action? That's what we want to see. Thank you. Well,
if you were listening well, Judge, I have had some recommendations. We talked about the issue of multi-taxation, and the DG LCCI mentioned the fact that this is not good, not only for the economy, but for the Nigerian people. But let's ask Dr. Yusuf very quickly, if there is an already existing platform where, you know, suggestions and solutions like these are being communicated to government, and what has been their response in the past?
Yeah, thank you. Well, there are quite a number of platforms through which we engage the authorities, but that engagement does not preclude the kind of conversation that we are having. Because apart from engaging with the authorities, we also should be able to discuss these issues the way we are discussing them. At the federal level, I mean, the organized private sector meets with the agencies of government. There was a time we were having regular meetings with the vice president on a quarterly basis, you know, until that was stopped. There are some of our members in some of the committees of government, SCCI, we interface with them. But you see, when you are talking of advocacy, advocacy is not only about interfacing or making recommendations. It's also, to some extent, a question of discussing generally the way we are discussing. As we discuss, at least people are calling in, and some public officials are also listening. So these things also have their own impact. It's not a question of condemning what government has been doing. Government has been doing quite a number of things, right? I talked about the reform that is being done. I talked about the PIB that is in the works. You know, we are seeing a return to January-December cycle of the budget. So there are quite a number of things that are doing well. We talk about the stock exchange, even though it's a result of the monetary policy. We talk about the fact that interest rates are declining. These are things that we can commend.
Dr. Yusuf, Olawale has called in now from Ikorodu. I'm going to be back with you in just a moment. Good morning, Olawale.
Good morning, Nifemi.
Good morning to you.
Hello?
Go ahead, I can hear you. Go ahead with your contribution.
Okay, God bless you. Yes. Yes, it is one thing to have an economic team. The chairman of the economic team, Professor Salami, is a very, very big economist, and we know what he has achieved in life, in private sector. But let me tell you, how many times has the economic team met? Okay? How many times has the president sought their opinion or advice on critical issues? You see, those are the factors. After some time, after they have given the president advice, there are some cabal. People who don't know anything about economy that will go and give the president another advice. That's why things are not working.
But how are we sure about? Look, so I've also heard a lot about cabal, Olalekan, but Is there evidence to prove, Olawale, to prove all of these allegations? Because we have to be careful to also make comments that are TV friendly. Anybody can say anything, but if there are no proofs, we're not likely going to entertain that submission on television. Because of the rate the calls are coming in, Dr. Yusuf, let me just ask you this very quickly. The commencement of trading under the AFCFTA on 1st of January is perhaps considered one of the most significant milestones in the continental integration project. Let us talk about the benefits of this for Nigeria, and can we anticipate the gains in 2021?
Well, the benefits are very obvious. They are very clear. First, it presents an opportunity of a much bigger market, which was part of your intro. The Nigerian market is just, we have a population of about 200 million people. The African market presents an opportunity of a population of 1.2 billion people. That's a huge market. And if you look at the totality of the economy of the continent, we are talking of an economy of about $3 trillion US. So, and in business, the bigger the market, the bigger the opportunities. So that is the logic of the benefits that these things offer. But before you can take advantage of these opportunities, you must also come into the space with products that are competitive, either in price or in quality, or both. Because trade is about competitiveness. So the opportunities are there. Then we need to now look at the strategies to access these opportunities, to ensure that our companies in Nigeria are very competitive, which is part of the discussion that we have been having. It's a question of having the right kind of investment and business environment so that our companies can also compete very well with other countries in Africa.
Absolutely, Justin
take
Yusuf.
advantage of this huge market.
Let me quickly take Issa's call from Kaduna. Good morning, Issa. I think we lost that call. We have a very short time now, but how optimistic are you, Mr. Mavinori, that we have the structure on ground? Nigeria just opened its border. The issue of the tariff on these goods, the movement, and the free movement of people and goods, continentally. Do we have a structure that will make this seamless and achieve all of the lofty goals that have been highlighted?
Well, for me, I can say we are not there yet, but there is what we call continuous improvement in project management. So it is an opportunity for us to continue improving on our manufacturing sector. And then I will go with what this great economist says, what they call 10 tenets of economics. One of them is that competition will make competition will make everybody better off. I don't believe so much in protectionism. I believe so much in competition. And this African Continental Free Trade Agreement has actually done to us. All we gain majorly is the exposure to competition. We are looking at, before now, Nigeria, what they call intra-trade between the African region, Africa as a region. If you look at the trade among African countries, has always been about 15% compared to about 70% that we have in other regional economy like Europe and the likes. So it is an opportunity for us to expand. We are looking at 1.2 billion population and over 200 in Nigeria. And again, we should also not look at that population alone, which is where Nigerians should be very cautious, else to become a dumping ground. Paul Roma said one time that it's not the population that matters, but the market size. So we are looking at 200 million Nigerians. How many of us can conveniently afford whatever it is being produced in Nigeria or being imported from other African countries? So that's why the purchasing power really needs to count. A case where we have over 100 million Nigerians living below abject poverty has actually projected us in the wrong. So we need to work on that so that we can take maximum advantage of this open trade. We are the largest economy in Africa, and before you know, if you don't handle this very well, you will see even a small country like Ghana overtaking us. So
let's
we need
take,
to be
let's
very
take
cautious.
Al-Bashir's call very quickly from Katsina. Al-Bashir, 20 seconds. Your time starts now.
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
My contribution to this program is that, these people had to be nurtured over time. As you see, toward the improvement we have been getting, let's say after the fall of pandemic, they have contributed toward achieving, let's say for the survival fund, which they have contributed toward the yield and the entire SMEs. So you see, it's something that's recommendable, and they have been recovering through certain effort, which we think towards 2021, as they promised to uplift the budget toward recovering economy and hope for the Nigerians. So it's not that we need to be prayerful. Let's pray for them, pray for the success, contribute toward their success so that at the tail end, we get to enjoy the dividend of democracy. Okay? Perfection is an attribute of God. So rather, whatsoever they did, they can't do it 100%, but we should be mindful, hopeful for what they have been contributing toward the economy.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. A good recommendation to the Vice President toward leading an economic team, which they have been, leading toward a think tank committee, which they always implement at instant and do the right thing.
That's how much time we have, Al-Bashir from Kaseda. Thank you very much for your contribution. Gentlemen, we have to go. Dr. Yusuf, 1 minute. Let's talk about what you expect to be done differently. Just pick one idea in less than 60 seconds to make the economy better in 2021.
Well, we need to strengthen engagement between the operators in the economy and the policy makers. We need to constantly appraise our policies, our regulatory practices. We need to do a lot more about infrastructure. We need to do a lot more about security. We need to do all of these things that impact on the investment environment so that we position our companies, our country to be able to create more jobs and make this economy much more prosperous.
Absolutely.
This is a thing we need to do and do better.
Absolutely. So Nigerians need a break. They just want to hear good news. I mean, if FRS could make trillions in revenue in a pandemic, in a year of the pandemic, just give them good news for 2021. I mean, give us some good economic indices.
Well, the greatest good news is that we'll come out of recession in this 2021. That is it. And then,
but you're not sure it will be in the first quarter?
It can't be in the first quarter. That one is clear. Then again, just as what George from Ikeja said the other time, that we're always discussing problems. And if we want, my own recommendation to government this time around is that they should listen. When someone is discussing problem, then address that problem. You have already created a solution. But if you look at inventions that we have in the world, inventions don't come from a solution. They come from questions, from addressing problems. So why can't you have this way? So if you are eating on a particular issue, you don't need to attack economists and call them media economists. Listen to what they are saying and do exactly or go in the direction of what they are saying. Then we can have a better economy. I see 2021 being better than year 2020.
Chartered accountant economist, thank you for your time.
Thank you
Dr.
very much.
Muda Yusuf is Director General, Lagos State, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. It's always a good time to have you on the program. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Happy New Year to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that's our show today. We'll be back tomorrow, God willing, with another exciting one. Stay with us.